Welcome to the Freight Project Podcast, brought to you by Cerasis, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project Podcast episode, I welcome longtime Cerasis account executive Derek Haynes to talk about his and Cerasis's longtime focus on developing lasting partnerships in freight management in order to help shippers achieve both short-term and long-term goals. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Well, hello, Derek. It's great to have you on the Freight Project Podcast. It's exciting to hear from you as a sales agent here at Cerasis because really you're on the front lines in everyday conversations with not only prospects trying to get new customers on board, but with customers that have been with us for a while. And, you hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, the market's transportation management problems that obviously, as a company out here, Cerasis exists to solve with our technology and solutions. So you're a great guest to have you on the podcast today to talk about those great conversations that you have and to talk a little bit further about the Cerasis unique value proposition and why it's really hard to say that there's just one or even just a couple, as really the true value is really bigger than that. It's a really overarching thing. And in truth, it's a lot of things, and they all come back to a center place that we're going to dive into in a bit. But before we do, since you are a first-time guest on the podcast, we wanted to get to know who is Derek Haynes, and can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, Adam, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So my background is now almost 16 years with Cerasis as a sales rep. And before that, I was in software licensing sales for kind of large accounts. And this was kind of a good move for me, I think, in terms of I have a software background or technology background and knock on a lot of doors. And, basically it was a situation where I came on, learned transportation, and probably more importantly, learned, how technology and visibility to your information within transportation is such an important, it has an important role. So been a good 16 years so far.
Yeah. So an old hat here at Cerasis, been here longer than me. And, you've seen a lot of changes in the industry. It's really interesting. And just in my last 7 years, it's been seemingly rapid. It kind of reminds me of when I started seeing the same sort of transformation in marketing and really any business process that exists within a business has seen some disruption. But I was really surprised to see that freight, even just 7 years ago, was not as technologically driven. Yeah, there was a TMS, of course. Cerasis has had one web-based since 1998, a long time. But it didn't seem like there were advanced tools. There weren't, deep adoption of tools either. So, there wasn't a lot of demand for development. So I think that really plays well into what we can discuss today about, one, just your 16 years of experience just at Cerasis, your experience in selling technology solutions and kind of showing companies that there is a better way, but also the longer longevity of Cerasis. And I think what has allowed you to stay here, a lot of our employees and a lot of prospects have become customers and then stayed for a long time, is our hard look at the value of partnership in long-term, sustainable, stable freight management. And one of our core values at Cerasis is continuous improvement. And when you think of the customers that you've signed up with Cerasis as their transportation management partner, what does that core value of continuous improvement mean to you? And then what has it meant to the success of those customers that you've signed up along the years?
Yeah, I think as I think about it, I came into this not knowing much about transportation, and so I think it was one of those deals where the relationship helped me. I learned from them; they learned from me, and I've been fortunate to be around a lot of people, smart people within my customer base, but also within Cerasis, have kind of educated me along the way to understand transportation. But more importantly, probably from the customer side, understanding their business, because and that's probably one of the most exciting pieces, is that you really get to learn how a business works in this industry. You're sitting down, you're talking about all the different departments and how they're affected by transportation, and then you learn why technology and why our solution and services enable them to grow or get a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And so you look at them and they're looking at ways to scale and grow. And as you do that, you learn not only about the basics of their business and how they started it and how they grew and how they're plan to move forward, but also the strategies that they'll utilize moving forward. And then how do we fit as a partner? Where I'm not just some guy coming in talking about discounts. I'm actually a real partner talking about things that are going to help them to move forward and grow in their industry. So it's a rewarding thing to be in, to talk to somebody about their business and not just be sitting around talking about freight the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, at the end of the day, seeing a problem and being able to solve it. And it happens to wrap around freight. But guess what? Freight happens to also be an integral part of a customer's experience. It also has to be an integral part of a business's ultimate success. You look at Amazon, they started selling books, right? They started getting pretty good at it. And Apple, they brought in the iPod and then later the iPhone. And who's the CEO of Apple now? Who's the biggest company in the world now? Amazon. So when you look at Tim Cook, the former supply chain officer who delivered the promises of marketing from Steve Jobs, and you look at Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, Amazon, the most influential company in the world, the two things that those massive cash-rich companies now have in common are that they got really good at delivering freight. And it was not even a conversation really necessarily about all the details around freight. It was more a business conversation. And that kind of continues with those companies getting more successful, that spirit of continuous improvement. And along the way, they couldn't have done it without great partnerships. And I think in your experience, if you look at that continuous improvement spirit, if both parties, Cerasis and our shippers, in that partnership are really after that spirit of continuous improvement and agree on practicing it together, and that's something that's stated in that conversation that you're having in the sales process. How do you then extend that to them signing up with, Cerasis? What ultimately drives the undertaking of a shipper who partners with Cerasis?
So I believe it's a combination of technology and solutions along with our experience. I can speak from my point of view, nearly 16 years in the industry. Now, I've been lucky to be around, lots of really smart people, good customers that have helped me to both learn the industry and then have that education to pass forward. And then, as we move forward and learn more about each customer, it's a give and take in a scenario where it just becomes, like you said, a partnership.
Well, and I think that's what's great about what we do. When you solve problems for one shipper, and you see what they're going through, and you're able to solve that and overcome it, you can take that to someone who has a similar problem as well. And that's kind of the beauty of being literally in the middle between our carrier partners and our shipper partners, and having that in-house technology team. And you and I have seen Gerald, who was a guest recently on the podcast talking about final mile solutions. He's our development manager, where he's able to take that, continuous improvement spirit, not only from folks like you who are, servicing and signing up shippers, but our shippers and our carriers, and take all that combined feedback to really make sure everybody is a beneficiary. So it's a really good kind of way to think about it. And that makes sense that continuous improvement is one of our core values. But let's go a little bit deeper on this partnership level. One of the things that really intrigued me that you said in one of our earlier conversations is that you've had some of your customers recently sign up who ultimately didn't pull the trigger in partnering with us maybe 5 or even 10 years ago. But, after a while of either one of those companies going with a competitor or maybe doing it in-house, they did decide to partner with us. So why didn't they partner with us then? And what was it that had them come on board ultimately?
Yeah, I would say, the short answer, or at least one, is persistence. I stay on the phones and I stay on email, but also stay relevant to what's happening, providing good information in those emails, providing good information in the voicemail or in the time when I do get in touch with people. It's huge because you never know when one of those topics are going to hit. They're going to strike a chord with them. Ultimately, what happens is, I'll go in and visit with a prospect, and they may stay with an incumbent, and then over time, I continue to stay in touch, and I find that the prospect is not getting some of the promises that the supplier promises. They're just not fixing problems that they continually have, and then you run into a scenario where here I am, and I've got the answers, and that's the beautiful thing about it is, when you come in and you have a real solution. I can remember back when I was selling software, and it just seems like you bring in a software, and a company will only use a tenth of what the software has to offer. With Cerasis, I just feel confident when you go in that the program that we provide, the technology, the solution it fits right in line with what the needs of the customer has. So.
That's kind of cool confidence. We've all used some pretty big software, and I think that's going back to the marketing comparison. There's some platforms out there that do a heck of a lot. And, I'm a pragmatic marketer, and I think there's a lot of pragmatic shippers. I think logisticians are pragmatic by nature, and that's what they do. And they want things that work, right? They want things that once they start using it, not only is it seemingly fairly easy to use, takes very little training, although we'll provide that, but that they're going to get more value as they continue to use it, not only just from the core functions, but because as things like Final Mile come on board or e-commerce, that they're able to easily continue to use the same system they've been using, but get the advantage of new features. So that's fantastic that those, customers that you signed up are now gaining those benefits. And what you also mentioned is you went a little bit further, talking about more shippers being attracted to the value of data and reporting that data, and how, that ties back to this spirit of partnership and continuous improvement and long-term results. And it's not always easy to see those long-term results pay off big time with a partnership. You got to sometimes have some patience and trust. You've talked about that here today. But what do you say to those shippers who are looking for a partner, but maybe need some quick wins? How do you combat that objective? Are shippers thinking less short-term and more long-term, thus making partnering with a 3PL like Cerasis even more attractive?
Yeah, I think there's probably a mix out there. Part of it is you have groups that with the marketplace, shareholders, equity firm board members. They're demanding. They're demanding numbers, and so you've got your operations directors and vice presidents out there having to try to get that data, try to assemble some sort of report to be able to supply to them on what's happening. Sometimes that's even daily or weekly, typically monthly, but how do they get that data? Do they have that data? Is it available? Is there anybody helping them understand exactly what the data means? Fortunately for us, when you talk about quick wins or you talk about long-term objectives, we're typically, like I said, fortunately able to do both of those things. But to me, it's more important to show, I guess in the long run, to show my customers who they really are. Because what you end up finding out is that a company really because they don't have the data, because they don't have the information, they don't really know who they are in terms of what decisions do I make? How do I make them? How can I make them better? Where are there areas where I can, avoid costs and make things easier? So I just think with our technology and our solution, it's so intuitive. It just makes it easier for a customer to look at us versus many of the others that I've come across and say, I can make this change. It seems doable for me. It seems like something I can do, and I get my personnel to go and become compliant.
Yeah, that's tough. And I think there's so many options out there. There's so many platforms that are burgeoning, pure TMS without the exception services that like we provide with freight claims or some of the accounting features and carrier relations side of the house that are, trying to, I think, address that issue, right, of easy onboarding. But at the same time, are they still leaving a shipper, to their own devices to use a tool to try and figure out their own problems? And I think that's where our that partnership comes in, and we're able to kind of root out and find, those problems. So that way, when it is time to use the tool, they feel confident that no matter what happens, the tool is going to be the core of it, but that we're going to be there if something comes up. And so, those short-term wins are important. I think it's key to talk about that, to talk about rates, your costs, but it's also more important, I think, to look at total costs. And that includes much more than just the freight rates itself. That includes much more than just getting a tool, but how much time are you spending negotiating rates? How much time are you, calling carriers, emailing them just for individual shipments? How much time are you using to manage individual locations and their compliance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And it can really get kind of difficult and out of control. But beyond those short-term, things to consider, and really why it's important to kind of look at, short-term and long-term, let's talk about some of those actual results from your customers. Due to this partnership and our technology and solutions, what results are you seeing, and what would they tout as successes of partnering with Cerasis?
Yeah, I think you hit on quite a few of them when you talk about compliance and visibility, and just an understanding. Kind of building off what I just mentioned is, understanding who you are. But I think until you actually partner with us, like you said, some of those things don't come to fruition. And then you start seeing things like, okay, I'm recovering my cost. I can see a cost at the time of shipment now that I'm confident with Cerasis. So, where I may have been waiting on an invoice to come in from the carrier before, now I'm just billing at the time of shipment. And so it improves my cash flow, it improves my ability to shorten that receivable cycle when it comes to, billing out for product and freight. I think about, of course, that's something that's always been around for us, the bill audit, the consolidation and payment of bills, and, reducing the number of checks. More recently, probably I'm noticing, visibility and compliance. If you think, granted, compliance probably always been one of those things where everybody, when we talk about compliance, but people are actually making actions to fix those things now versus I think in the past where maybe they've just glossed over it. But we give those tools to them to be able to see, when you think about processing a shipment and, maybe in the past you just threw it on the recent carrier that you've been using. Maybe you got a price, maybe you didn't. The only record recorded at that time is on the carrier's website or with the carrier when you called it in, and they may have written down the price and the carrier. But when you process every shipment and you have checks and balances throughout the process, it gives you the information on the back end and that visibility on the back end to be able to look and say, this is where we're making mistakes, or this is where we could do something a little bit differently in order to either give a better customer experience for their customers or just be able to clean up the internal process so that, you're not running around trying to figure out what happened with the shipment, where it's at, how much it costs, and whether or not you recovered those costs.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I say this probably every single podcast episode. Listeners might be tired of it, but it's true. Freight managers, people who manage freight and that whole process, that's a pretty tough job. I don't know if I could cut it, and I definitely would need help. And I have to think that there's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace as a shipper, and that, when we look at 2019 versus 2018, it's like night and day when it comes to capacity. But at the same time, there's seemingly a new technology in freight every single day. So is that the right tool, or is this the right tool? And, it's nice to hear maybe some sound experience talking about the fundamentals and the value of partnership, and that's what we're trying to get across here at Cerasis, because we really are, wanting to be partners and be a good company and, only come with solutions. So it's good to hear that, your customers are seeing some of the results they want to see and that they have some help out there. So that's good. But another thing I always like to ask guests, and before I let you go, I want to get your insight on kind of what's next in transportation management. What will shippers truly use next? Not maybe what's being hyped out there technologically, like a blockchain or something. And it's been a softer year this year, right? But I have a feeling shippers aren't waiting to get stung, and they're looking at the future, and they want to get more proactive in stabilizing freight management. So with that said, what is your perspective for the next few years for shippers and what they're focusing on?
Yeah, I would say, or maybe what I'm running into, and it seems like the conversations seem to always come back to the data, to the information, and to understanding. I mean, I guess we talked about, or you hear about big data all the time, and you hear these companies that are, out there collecting kind of a B2C style. They're collecting consumer information all the time so they can try and figure out how to, I guess, essentially make their next sale and keep, the advertisements of the things that they believe that they're interested in front of them as many times as possible. But if you think about it from a customer or from a company's perspective, am I internally collecting and providing the right kind of data for every order, for every action that's happening, and then how do I use it? So I think about, how do I capture my information first? How easy is it to get to that data on the back end? Do I understand it? And how do I improve my processes, or cut my costs, or take costs out of my supply chain or different areas within my organization by utilizing the data? And in a lot of ways, it seems like people don't have, or companies. I talked to an executive the other day who said he can't get the data that he's looking for from his current provider. And he's asked several times, and it's always, I'm working on it. And it's things that we do on a daily basis, through our data services group, or just through some of the, lack of a better term, canned reports that we've already built, because, there are others out there that are similar to them that have the same needs. We've built it for them. So that data internally, how you capture it on the front end and how you're able to report on it on the back end, it tells you who you are and how you can positively make change. I think it's more and more people are looking at that seriously, rather than, oh yeah, I've got some data. Well, I haven't really had a chance to look at it. Now, not only do you have the data, but you have a partner with us who's looking at it on a daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly basis, and also giving you ideas on how you can, positively make the changes to drive down costs and increase profit on every order.
Well, that's where it's at, right? Increasing profit, improving EBITDA, making your customers happy. And it's hard to do that in today's environment without a great partner. And I said this to a lawn company I hired. So I had a big corporate lawn company who did the fertilizer, weeds, year to year. And at a certain point, they never talked to me. They never asked me, how's it going? They never provided much visibility into what they were doing. They didn't give me any data on how things were improving. And I have St. Augustine, and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And so I started feeling sort of like a number from the big corporation, and started, asking them questions, and they didn't provide that data. And so I went to a local person, and, the reason I told the big company I left was I didn't feel like you were a partner in the success of my lawn, because it's important to me. And the new guy and the local company doing it, they come in, they talk to me, they give me the time, they're a person, they're a true partner. And my lawn is the better for it. And you know what? I'll continue to spend money with this new company for probably real long time and continue to refer them. Mm-hmm. And that's how you do it. You do the right thing, you truly partner, and you're there long-term for success. And, Cerasis benefits from that. The shippers benefit from that. So do the carriers. And so that way we can all work together to make sure that the end customer and everybody has a good experience around freight. So thanks for all that, Derek. I really appreciate you coming in on the Freight Project podcast today to talk about the true value of partnerships in freight management. We'll have to have you again on in the future. So thanks again.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all of our great listeners out there, we thank you each week for your support and for listening and tuning in. Have a great week. We'll see you on the next episode.